Welcome for folks that are going to be joining. I'm doing a quick live stream here, and we're going to have a recap of this stream for the folks that can't make it and kind of narrow this down into, a bite-sized, component of us versus having a stream that's like 30 minutes. Have it down to bite-sized like 5 minutes. So I want to make sure that you guys all have access to the sources that I'm getting this information from, and then how to do your own research when things like this go down, such as Solana being down for 17 hours and still on a period of recovery when it comes to all the ancillary services that plug into a network like Solana, where you have wallets and staking services and that sort of thing. And anybody that's trying to use some of those services and either unstake or move their coins around, exchanges, all of that fun, still being folks that are impacted and not being able to do anything with that. So this I was going to do as just a video, but I think that we need to cover it as a stream, and then we'll have a subsequent video that condenses it down. So thanks guys for joining, and we'll have a small section for questions towards the end, and let's kind of get into it. So if you're just coming into this video and you're one of the few lucky ones that were able to click and watch it live, what's happened with Solana? So there's been questions. Was it hacked? Was this a DDoS attack, which is when somebody will send a lot of transactions? And what I'm going to try to explain in this video is like, how do DDoSs work on crypto networks? Why do you not hear about a ton of DDoS attacks with a lot of cryptos versus like a website that goes down or something if somebody hits it with a transaction flood or anything like that? What's happened in the last 24 hours with Solana is Solana experienced a very high rate of transactions that actually bubbled up and essentially took down all the nodes. They essentially ran out of memory. So nodes started failing. They have different hardware stacks. If you look at trying to produce a validating node for Solana, it's a very expensive proposition. If you get the minimum specifications, you're talking like a Threadripper Pro, 128 to 256 gigs of RAM, NVMe drive space, like very expensive setup for a node for Solana. And the ability to process those transactions and move that chain along is resting on very high-end hardware. So the fact that it was able to hit, 400,000 transactions, provided most of that was spam, kind of shows the resiliency of a network that's, I would call it, quote unquote, semi-centralized, but having it go to that point and then shut down and freeze up. And folks are like, well, how does it shut down and freeze? Well, on in cryptocurrency and a blockchain, what ends up happening is you'll end up having a whole bunch of micro forks. You'll have a whole bunch of nodes that don't know where to go with transactions because they don't know who's essentially the highest block. They'll start processing transactions and broadcasting transactions, and then you'll have discrepancies on the network. And then you'll end up having all these little micro forks that occur. And so there is no authoritative state of truth. And the moment you start losing authoritative state of truth on a blockchain, you have what's considered kind of an epic issue. So what's happened is, and if we go back in, we look at the original, I'm going to switch over to a screen here, the original statement that came out yesterday, early yesterday, 8 a.m. around Eastern Standard Time. Let's go over to the laptop real quick and take a look here. So notes here. You guys, all those notes are down in the description too, if anybody wanted the specific links. But we saw a tweet come out yesterday morning that this was, so the network started having an impact around 8 in the morning. The first kind of tweet acknowledging this that we see came out, it looks like about 2:11 p.m. Yesterday, where it's kind of an after action report. And then essentially, if you want more information, go hit the Discord at that point in time. So forking led to excessive memory consumption, causing some nodes to go offline. Engineers in the ecosystems are trying to stabilize the network but were unsuccessful. That's really leading into what the delay was. So you started having an effect of a huge amount of transactions starting to hit the network, started slowing down the network, and then started having all this cascading effect to all the different nodes. They got out of sync. Then you had a follow-up tweet that came at 9:53 p.m. So we're talking just over 12 hours, right? So if it started happening at 8 in the morning and we're like 13, almost 14 hours later, a patch comes out for nodes and validator nodes to run in preparation of restarting the network. And then you had a follow-up tweet that came out at 1 a.m., right? So now we're looking at the time there from almost 10 to 1. You're looking at another almost 4 hours where most of the restart was complete after upgrading, and that them putting out there that it's going to take several hours for dApps and other block explorers and stuff to start to recover. You see a reciprocation of that here on status.solana.com. And you can see kind of each of the different RPC nodes, DevNets, all that stuff. You can see, get kind of an uptime count here. Well, if you look at the mainnet beta, I know I'm going to have a whole other discussion about that. Right here, this big red one here, major outage. They calculated it at 17 hours and 12 minutes. So mainnet being down for 17 hours, and then still having a major outage right now, covering into today 9 minutes as these nodes have started to come online. So I'm going to take a safe assumption we're going to have some more yellow time on the mainnet having issues. So let's take a second to kind of unpack everything I just talked about real quick, and I want to explain the differences between something like Solana and something like Ethereum or Bitcoin. Well, Ethereum right now and Bitcoin right now. And I think we'll have a good animation to depict the differences here in a very elementary way coming up in another video for you guys. But I actually have my daughter working on it right now on Scratch, so she's going to put together something here. So what's the core difference? What's the main difference between something like proof of stake and proof of work when it comes to something like a DDoS attack? One of your very first impactful things on any cryptocurrency blockchain is the ability to kind of control spam. And this is usually done with a mechanism of a base fee. We in Ethereum know what the base fee is because the base fee is getting burned right now. And that's the main mechanism. When people are making transactions, they pay an incremental fee to the processing entity. If that's the miner for Ethereum, in Cardano's case, there's a micro fee included also for its validator nodes. The point of the base fee is it's for spam prevention at its most elemental level. Like it's to where if somebody's going to spam the network, they're going to pay for it, right? They're going to pay a certain fee, and it goes exponential if they want to saturate a network with a whole bunch of spam. It's going to cost you. It's going to cost you a lot of money if you want to try to take down a network. So there's a thing about it. The difference, and we're seeing this difference right now in something like Solana, and when I have discussions with you guys on this channel, and I talk about the differences between proof of work, consensus, and proof of stake, it goes tangentially to the architecture and design when it comes around the ability to prevent certain things, or not mixing essentially the nodes and the consensus piece here like you do with validators, where it's kind of in the train station, as it were, versus having an ability to have consensus run and operate and continually produce blocks, even if there's a rush of people to try to get on that train, versus having everybody inside of the train house and on the tracks and just locking everything up. Blocks stop producing, trains don't know where they're going, and you have a complete shutdown like this. When Ethereum and the Shanghai attacks happened in 2016, Ethereum slowed down significantly when it was getting DDoSed, right? It got DDoSed because the transaction fees were cheap, and the transaction fees did spike at that time when it was getting DDoSed, and it did cost somebody quite a bit of money to try to attack Ethereum. However, it never went down. They never had to restart nodes. It didn't work like that. There was no hot fixes to try to change the way things were coded to address that situation. Same thing with Bitcoin. You can try to spam Bitcoin and you're going to pay for it. When you have proof of work systems that are designed in this way, and you have not a mixing of those two elements, you have a less likelihood of this type of situation. And this isn't even my opinion of it. This is a technical, factual thing of things that have occurred already to date. We've had crypto around for 11 years. You don't think anybody's tried to DDoS it? It's happened on every major network in some capacity. The difference here is there was a code update to have to restart an entire network. And that part, while it concerns me, it's by no means is it like sell everything with Solana, get out of it or anything. It's still very, it's a very maturing network. It has a lot of potential. It just has to fix some things. And the part of the issue is I see with something like this is it's also still, they even consider it a beta network. And I don't like the mix of having that nomenclature mixed with a production environment, right? That's not beta. This is not beta. This is a production system that had an issue. They should pull that beta off the line, right? That first off, fix that naming. Your beta is not, your public beta, and this is a game that you just launched on Steam. This is a multi-billion-dollar network that just shut down for 17 hours, right? And that you were able to fix within 10 hours. This is a level and a lesson in due diligence for any other network out there. I'm looking at Avalanche. I'm looking at Polkadot to take a real hard look at those production networks and understand the attack vectors a little more clear, right? So people that can't unstake right now, people that have money locked up, the amount of questions I've received alone just on like, hey man, I went pretty long on Solana. Should I dump everything? What's going on here? Because they're not understanding the technical issues here of how a network is shut down for 17 hours. The last time I had a conversation like this was with IOTA having some finality issues. And even in Ethereum on Beacon, they've had some finality issues. And it still comes back down with the implementation strategy of changing kind of the foundation of the way some of this architecture works. And that divorce of having your separation from your security architecture, along with a base fee to prevent spam happening on the network, just slow it down and make the user experience like crap. Because there's the malicious acts of what's going on, and then could be potentially a state actor that could then attack it at some point, right? That has a lot more resources. And to make these things resilient from those kind of things that need to be identified. I wanted to pull this back real quick, excuse me, and look into some of the code. I don't go through code much with you guys, but in this particular case, I want to look at kind of what they did. So let's zoom in a little here. Let's zoom in. So what we're looking at is effectively what got merged yesterday. So I'm going to step you guys through this. You don't have to read code to know what's going on here, but I wanted to see what did they add? What was the change here? And with the change here, you can see here, line number 6, a data budget. So what they did is they changed the transaction forwarding limit. So what they've done is they've created an artificial speed bump, as it were, to prevent a flooding of transactions, which is kind of counterproductive in a way. This is a fix. This is an interim fix. This doesn't mean that this has to stay like this. I would be interested to see if they ever deprecate this change in lieu of a new fix. But effectively what they're doing is they're going to, they've limited the transaction throughput on a particular, through this particular function. And you can see it just keeps, you can see all this function being added in all these different lines here. of what it's trying to do here. So it's max sizing this data function. And, you know, there was a question here, any reason for these magic numbers? Why are you picking this particular set? That kind of question, when I see that, is somebody would do some metrics on what's an average day in the life of Solana under a high transaction standpoint. What's that sweet spot that you'd want to have a transaction limiting factor at? And then give it another 20 or 50% because of a spike or a surge in use. Right now, it was pretty unfeathered and uncapped because we essentially scrolled all the way up to until the network shut down, right? So effectively, it wasn't that there was a transaction limit on Solana. It was like pretty much, man, just floor it until she blows, baby. And that's effectively what happened at a very low cost to whoever was DDoSing, right? So there's been a transaction forward limit on this, which then should keep some of these nodes in check and keep them synced. And you can see down here, and then there should be a test underneath this. This is the test that would run for like a unit test to validate this function within that. But I wanted to go in there and take a look at like what was added, what was changed, were there metrics or this? So there's some hard-coded values in here. So there's actually, they got some hard-coded values right into this. And so I'm interested in some of that. In a time of crisis, I will not scrutinize why they did this. I will not scrutinize why they pick their numbers. Like in a crisis, I get it. Like you are on fire control right now. You are trying to get control of it, get the network back up, and then you kind of come back and do a hot wash. So right now, priority 1, get network back up. Priority 2, come back in, do your retrospective, and figure out the next steps. The lessons learned from this, though, should be transcending the entire, Ethereum, specifically to Beacon. This isn't going to be the only time that networks are DDoS, and how are they going to handle it? And can people rely on networks that are going to go down like that? 17 hours is a long time. And yes, they're considering it beta, but there's Solana's what's the market cap on Solana right now? It's something ridiculous because it's went up parabolically. Solana's sitting at 7th position. It's 158. It's a 4 billion or 40. Yeah. What's the volume? The volume's been 4 billion. The network's worth almost $50 billion. $50 billion beta network, my dudes. Like, I don't know. Like it's just, they're doing, it's a tough thing to deal with something like this. I understand, but like, this is the risk. This is why I tweeted out a few days ago when it was over $200. When you have a parabolic rise, you usually have a precipitous fall right after that for a range of reasons. When you get enough influence on a network and you have enough growth, the incentive is there to do bad things also, where people are going to attack it. They're going to do things. They're going to create FUD. They're going to do something in a market cycle on the short sell side. It happens every time with these networks. And I didn't know what it was going to be when I tweeted out when it was just over $200, but it's this kind of stuff that ends up hitting them and eating your lunch, right? Just be conscious of those type of things on these newer networks that don't have proven out architecture. We're finding it out in real time on this stuff. And I'm wishing for the success for Polkadot and all of these networks, right? I'm just concerned and, weary of that FOMO that comes with that. So that's why we do these videos, to come back, explain, show you guys the sources in the description, the links to all these different things. Follow these guys on Twitter. If you're invested in Solana or you're trying to launch a new NFT on Solana, or you're trying to figure out, make sure you know the status. Make sure you're following some of those updates and statuses with people. There's a whole bunch of links in there. I tweeted out, I put out all the Reddit connections, all that kind of stuff there. I'm going to take a few questions. We're going to try to keep this locked to no more than a half hour. We are going to have a recap on this, like the top 5 things and just down to the bottom line on what happened here and the subsequent fixes. Hopefully you guys like this kind of content. One question for Twitch.
What is Solana's purpose if we're all mining ETH and BTC? What's even the point of going after Solana?
So the question was, what's the point of Solana if we're mining ETH and BTC? So Solana is just another network. And the reason why I'm covering Solana is because it does have an impact on the overall ecosystem when it comes to something like proof of stake. That Ethereum, if you are mining Ethereum and you are a holder of Ethereum, it matters to you a lot on how the behaviors of proof of stake networks work. Even though proof of stake with ETH is going to be a little different, they handle their base fee a little different, but it's not necessarily susceptible to the exact same attack as this, but it is absolutely susceptible to issues in finality, which is the way consensus is achieved with a validator style slashing co-ownership federated type of network that proof of stake is. And I say that with all respect to people trying to ensure that proof of stake becomes decentralized, but you're making a relationship with the network when somebody else can impact your supply being, if it felt like you have violated any of the contractual terms with being a validator, that they can take part of your stack. You are in a relationship. That is a federation by nature. So the decentralization, anytime you're moving to something like that. So people that have been mining ETH and supporting ETH for a long time and will continue to support ETH, or maybe even have a validator, making sure that we're covering other aspects of crypto that have this same type of architecture, and then some of the lessons learned from that. So we can all look at it and go, hey, are we going to be covered here if we're going to be a validator on Ethereum, if we want to participate in Solana's ecosystem? It does have cheaper fees. It's been really ramping up heavy with its own NFT platform. And then the bridging of a lot of these networks, Binance Smart Chain, Ethereum, proof of stake when it happens, Uniswap, all the Sushi Swap, all these different dexes that'll start to interact with all these different tokens and wrap tokens on each other's networks. It is relevant to this audience here.
Someone just asked, any thoughts on Ravencoin Lite?
I have not looked into Ravencoin Lite. I don't know anything about it. I mean, anybody can fork a coin.
What are your views on proof of stake in regards to uptime with proof of work miners?
Repeat that one more time. I was reading something else. What was the?
Proof of stake in regards to uptime with proof of work miners can just leave when there is more profitable coin.
It's a different value proposition. So the question was, what's the difference between proof of stake that have stake in a system and proof of work that can go with the ebb and flow of profitability, to where miners can redirect their hash rate to other aspects? The core difference is in the incentive, right? So the incentives in a proof of stake network are far less. So your inflation rate's a lot lower, and you make a stake in that, and you have essentially a linear path on your growth there. Like it's your variable growth rate is a lot lower. The proof of work networks are highly predicated, especially right now with Ethereum, on that variable income that comes in from transaction volume. Eventually that will move over to proof of stake. So if a validator gets chosen to mint a block, it's also going to get an extremely large bump in its revenue profile. This is why a lot of validators right now on Ethereum want the merge to happen, is because then they'll start earning those rewards like the miners do on what's remaining on the MEV side. But it's a force projection of hash rate, right? So this is a common I would call it almost an attack vector on the proof of work side. So the question is a valid question where you can have the incentive fall, the ebb and flow, the incentive goes up and down the stack. All that happens is the network does shrink some. But if you look at it right now, Ethereum by far is the most powerful thing when it comes to profitability to mine for a GPU and for ASICs that are Ethash. But you still have massive networks, massive amounts of GPUs on networks that are less profitable for a range of reasons. It's not always about that current profitability. Sometimes it's the longer term opportunity cost when it comes to what you're going to have something pointed to. And it's not somebody claiming that. It's not me just claiming that that's a thing. Literally look at the networks. There's 20 plus terahash on Ethereum Classic. There's 9 terahash and growing on Ravencoin. And these things are less profitable right now. So it's not always a profit game. It is a long-term strategic play for these service providers that provide hash rate. So, it's not as linear as one would make an argument.
With regards to proof of stake, can they possibly take coins that are staked if you lose out on it?
So one of the questions was, with proof of stake, since you have that relationship, can somebody take your stake? So there is a mechanism built in proof of stake on most all proof of stake networks called slashing, which is a negative incentive to do certain bad behavior things. And if the consensus of the network is that a particular node provider was doing something that met those criteria, they would slash a small percentage of your stake. This is that relationship that concerns me, not because of that behavior. I think that's a normal behavior. You want to create a disincentive to do negative things. However, I don't have absolute confidence in that can't be exploited in some way. And then, validators or a group of validators on a configuration of a pool that hasn't paid attention to things, that's trying to do some kind of derivative validator node. And they inadvertently open and expose that key pair or that, do something that exposes the ability to leverage that negative stake and redirect it, right? It's supposed to go stake and burn, but you're entering in a relationship and it's based on software. And I just don't, I'm worried at the risk of that. Anytime you enter a relationship, it's kind of a not your keys, not your coins situation. And a lot of these proof of stake nodes, the difference also is, one of the fundamental differences on proof of stake and proof of work is I have a wallet that I can mine to, that's a hardware wallet, that could be offline and it's not accessible. If I'm a validating node, I'm online. I'm a hot wallet. So I'm a node. It's pairing the mining and the consensus with the node and the locked stake, right? So, even if the signing is two-factored, or you have a situation where people don't go through with a hardware wallet, it's a different attack vector again, because you have an online staked wallet. And this isn't always the case. I think there are some instances where, it's pointing and referencing where you could keep a wallet offline and the stake as collateral. Like I have seen options for that, but what's the reality of accessing those funds and making adjustments to those funds from a staking or a slashing mechanism, right? There's just a fundamental difference between the way proof of stake and proof of work on that aspect. That still just maybe I will be convinced at some point. I'm not against the idea of it. It's just almost every facet of it sounds cool for about 3 minutes, and then I start walking the dog on some of the execution risk from just implementation, code deployment, node deployment, slashing, situations like this where you could get desynced, network restarts, like this, like we're seeing it play out right now with Solana. And I think it's gonna, I personally think that it's gonna impact decisions on the schedule for Ethereum 2.0. I think they're going to have to really look at, like, are we protected from this kind of issue? And they should have. I'm surprised that I haven't seen it. And if it has went out and I haven't seen it, that's fine too. Like, it could be out, but I'm surprised they haven't. I know that there's been a lot of back and forth with Ethereum, but I haven't seen something official saying, hey, this won't affect Ethereum 2.0 because we have X. We have a higher base fee. We have, I've seen the rebuttal on Ethereum 1.0, which I agree with. It's a proof of work network. I get it. All right, my dudes, we're right at 30 minutes. This hopefully gave you guys some insight to what's going on with Solana, and definitely some of the links below. We're going to have a recap of this video, hopefully just straight to the points. It won't have the question and answer. It's just going to get straight into the main points of this. We'll have some graphics thrown on top of it for the TLDR bros that are just like, bro, I don't have time for this whole video. But we're going to get you guys taken care of there. We have some updates. We have the 3080 Ti here on the table. This is the cool one with the screen that you can do all kinds of cool stuff with. That is not really good for mining, but it's really awesome if it's in your desktop. And we're going to go through some testing with that. If you guys are looking at the mining spreadsheet, BBT Ray right now is going through a series of testing with that right now and trying different settings. We'll have those results in a video coming up for you guys. So can't wait to do that. And we have at least 2 more videos this week, and we'll do a few more live streams into next week with you guys. So hopefully things are good. And I see somebody said, what's up with Cardano? What's your thoughts on Cardano? That's its own video, my dude. And we'll get into it. So make sure you're liking, subscribe, and sharing if this helped you guys. We're trying to get to 100,000 before December, if at all possible. Help us get there, my dudes. And we will